So recap, we've talked about marriage, parenting, your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself. Even in those topics, I think that we got great questions afterwards. But then also there's so many other relationships not encompassed in those 4 categories. And so we wanted to kind of have some time and space to talk through some of that. So what we have is we had over the last few weeks, cards out for people to ask questions. We've incorporated just some questions we've received. Like maybe one person reached out to us with a question, but we didn't get the opportunity to answer it to everybody. So we've put some of those on a list. But really what we want today is the opportunity for it to be a bit more of a conversation too. So if we're answering, we have a list here. So if y'all are quiet and have nothing, great. We got a whole list we'll answer for you. But we do also want this to be an open conversation. So if we're saying something and you have a question about that, raise your hand. We'll wrap up our thought and then ask you. Then we'll repeat it also because we are recording, so we can cut out where you ask it later, but we'll repeat it so that it is captured for folks who want to go back and listen to the podcast later. You're laughing at how not nice I am. It's
no, I thought
you would have said that way more diplomatically.
I like that. Shut up and ask your question, okay?
I mean, that was my inner thought.
Yeah.
But we're praying about how love is kind.
It's like a White House briefing. Anyways, so here's so yeah, if you have any questions, we want to be able to answer that, and so feel free to raise your hand. We would love that. Love this to be interactive in a way, and then we'll wrap it up when we feel like that's right. Some of the questions we're going to ask today are things that we wanted to answer in a message. It just didn't really fit. Do we want to do that one first? Or
let's warm up a little bit.
Okay.
So okay. I'll ask it, and you can start answering.
Okay.
So
why wasn't it in the okay?
Because it's part of the intro, babe. So I have a friend who's going through a really rough season. How can I be a good friend to them, essentially?
Yeah. So okay, here's the thing. Your rough season is not your friend's rough season. And this is really, really important because we want to superimpose our lives onto other people's lives. Okay. It doesn't mean that it isn't a rough season. They may not be acknowledging it's a rough season. So one of the first things I try to do with any of my friend groups is not assume that this is terrifying or rough for them. They might have some healthy coping skills, and they might have some that you're just not in tune with yet, and it may not be ignoring. They might just be dealing with it really well. And so always ask the question with the assumption of you want to help or learn, right? So you please acknowledge people in the seasons that they're going through. So if a family member has passed, I think this would be maybe a kind of a communal example, and that we're all going to have people that pass close to us in our lives. It is a healthy thing as a friend to go to that person and say, hey, I can only imagine, or from my experience, how hard it is to lose somebody. How are you doing? Yeah. Right? So you're coming from the place of I'm genuinely, I'm not going to assume what you were supposed to be feeling or what this is supposed to, because what do you go from there?
Yeah, so I think that's a great first step is ask questions and listen. Don't make assumptions. On the flip side of that, I think you're coming from, don't assume their experience. The other thing we do is we let our friends who don't have the ability to communicate what they need just sit because they don't tell us what they need. And so one of the things I really love is, you know your friends well enough to know things that would stress them out. So do I need to drop off food? Do I need to drop off a meal? And here's the way you drop off a meal, not, hey, here's food, I'm coming in, here we go. It is, hey, I'm driving to your house, I have a hot meal prepared. I can either leave this on the porch or I can come in and spend time with you. So you're kind of not giving them the option, I have food, eat it if you don't want, but if you need people, great. If not, here's a need. Or, hey, I have 2 hours today. Can I take your kids and you go do something else, or do you need to take a shower? Like, honestly, some of these tips I've come from, helping people moms specifically who have just had a baby. Like, mom can't tell you what she needs. There's no actual processing. At some point she can, but in the immediate she can't. But you have to know boundaries, and then if know your friends well enough that you know when you need to push the boundary a little bit, that they need you to push the boundary, but they can't like say it. Like, show up however you can, and remind them that you're present.
Something I learned from my experience, but then and to be able to help other people is that when someone's gone through a tragedy, mental health or outside tragedy, and I was there for them. I brought some food. We prayed together. I went to the hospital. I like to set a reminder in my phone 30 days from now to reach out again. And if they're not doing okay, I reset that reminder for another 30 days. The reality of like, I got 3 kids, a wife, a job. I can't do the every day. I like, if I'm more like Natalie, I could be every week, but she's an amazing caretaker and friend. I'm a good friend, but I'm not a caretaker. And so I have to set reminders to be there for people. So reach out. One of the great things about community of coming together and being honest with each other. We've had a few people. Natalie's way better at just saying names than, but I don't know. But we've had a few people that they've gone through things, and as they show up every Sunday, I get to ask them, how's that going? How are you doing? But if I don't get to be in direct relationship, I just kind of reserve it to every 30 days. So do we want to go right into that heavy question or okay, heavy question. I'll restate it, but I don't know. Maybe it's not as I don't know if it's as heavy as it sounds. How do you start conversations with your spouse when your family backgrounds are different and may not have been healthy?
I think this question also, we maybe cut it out, but it was framed in questions about parenting. Whoever brought this forward was
Yeah.
wanting to know, I want to start talking about parenting, but I know we have differing backgrounds and different, things. And so, I would start with, I guess we could answer on parenting and then zoom it out a little bit too. But in that specific place, I think there is really good conversations to be had about what your family experience was. And you think that you've had them, or I know when Eric and I got engaged, we did a road trip up to Kentucky. We were in Florida, and very quickly he met my whole family. And you think that's gonna, like, once someone meets the family, that does it. But the family you meet right now is not always representative of the childhood experience. Especially like my parents got divorced. And so my childhood experience up until 11 years old was in a home with both of them. What he came and experienced was the separateness of that was in some ways healthier and in some ways less healthy. And so asking questions and taking time to have conversations. When we do like premarital counseling, one of the things, we were trained on this great program, and it has you take this questionnaire and shows like your family distance. So it's like, are you a very connected family? Are you a disconnected family? And you'll see, like, when couples are polar opposite, there's a lot to work through there, right? But it's one of the questions they ask that I really love is, how does your family handle holidays? It's a really good opening question. And you may have seen how they handled holidays today, but how did they handle them? What were holidays like when you were little? And it starts those family dynamic conversations between each other that then you can listen and say, oh, you guys didn't really do like anything on Easter, but you grew up in a Christian house. Like, what does that look like? Or, for me, Christmas was a series of events. And so by the time I got married, really until Christmas 2024, I hated Christmas. And it was this thing, like this dark spot on our house in that holiday season that I'm just now healing from. But we had lots of conversations over the years about, well, this is what it was. Like the Christmas that my parents got divorced, all these things happened at the same time that created this break for me. So I think asking questions, not responding, listening and not responding, and not always knowing that your family didn't necessarily do it right or better than the other family.
The blessing in starting a family is that you are leaving one family and starting a new one. So Natalie, when we were married or when we were engaged, she made the decision that hey, you want to take my last name as well. That wasn't she's taking my last name. It was us deciding this is the new Wallace family. So although it's but Wallace before met my parents, Wallace now means Natalie and I. And so I'm still a part of that. And she's joining that in a lot of ways as daughter in law. But Eric and Natalie, as husband and wife and as parents of Balin, Marvel, and Rigby, this is new Wallace family. So we come in with our experiences and then now decide what is our family going to do with that. Which means we can bring in new traditions, we could throw out old ones, we could change it. And so the joy of that is getting to explore. So here's the thing I want you to pull from that in building your family dynamics, whether it is marriage or parenting, is I need you to let go of what was in order to start something new. This is the key of the what we talked about in the marriage of start over and try again. It is the journey of trying again and restarting a little bit and messing it around. This also means like being open to change because the person you're with is more important than a tradition or a value. I value you more than some standard because the standard can pass away. The standard, as we know through generations and generations, is a very fluctuating thing. But my marriage to my wife, what I am basing my future, my economics, my parenting, my career is off her being my rock, my solid place. So I got to put way more energy into that than anything else. And so what do you need? Oh, Christmas has to look a little bit different. Okay, can I express that I really like this and I would like us to change that? Her job is to meet me in the middle as well and go, I need to put aside some of my hurts and hangups, not ignore them, but in order to create a new thing, I got to go through that process. We've been married for 12 years. This was the first year in those 12 years that it was, hey, could we put up the tree earlier? And you go, really? You'll wait 11 years for that? I would wait longer because I don't care about a tree. I care about her.
The next question, you kind of started to talk about this, but in your marriage message, you teed up the idea of start over and try again. When marriage is getting tough, start over and try again. For clarity, the intent is start over with the same person and try again. The question here though is how many times do we try again and when do you give up on the try again?
Uh, yeah. Um, Jesus gives a parable about essentially forgiveness is kind of the core principle within it. Start over and try again. The concept underneath this is forgiveness. Forgiving yourself, forgiving your partner, and then trying again. The try again part of it is the grace of And we're going to have to do that again and again and again. And so what he's followed up with is a disciple comes up to him, real pompous. I think it's Peter, if I remember correctly, real proud of himself. And he says, Lord, how many times should I forgive somebody who's wronged me? Should I forgive them 7 times? And seven is a number that means complete in the Hebrew context. So he's like, seven would be enough, wouldn't it? Like, because most people, our law says that if they've wronged me like 2 or 3 times, that I could disown them. They're very clearly not ready to work with me. So I'll go double that. And in fact, I'll go to the complete number 7 times. So you see kind of the little bit of energy that he's bringing into this. Like, I'm wanting dad to say, you did it. Jesus, his correction is, no, 7 times, 70 times. And you go 490 times. No, he's trying to create an infinite number of completeness, that it would be a constant state of forgiveness. That is what you would live in. So the start over and try again is a constant state of forgiveness, that we would forgive ourselves, forgive the other person, and try again. Much easier to say than to actually live out, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note in that message, you had a disclaimer of there are times when it is not appropriate to continue to try again in your marriage. And there are biblical criteria where divorce becomes an acceptable solution. I am coming from a family, like I said, both my parents are on their third marriage, and it's really interesting to watch because in their third marriage, it feels like they're with the people they were supposed to be with. And so I think there are situations that a separation is called for. Typically, this is reserved, and correct me if I miss anything, but biblical standards talk about infidelity and abuse. Our cultural context on that is very different. So when Eric talked about last week, the time in our marriage where he had to take a backseat and not make any decisions, and that time was really heavy for me. And I had a really well respected leader in my life as I was going to leave my job last summer, coming out of that season. And her first question to me was, "Are you taking the kids and moving to Florida?" And I was floored by the question because not once had that been a consideration for me. But the outside world, who was aware of some things happening in our home, that was the jump to, hey girl, you have grounds to walk away. Now, for me, I had to think through what is the line. Like, and so if Eric had not chosen to get healthy, there probably would have come a line because we hit some really difficult scenarios, and I was unable to function as a human in the midst of his mental health crisis often. But he made a thing. And so there is grounds for divorce in the Bible. One of the things I really struggle with is people who have gone through a divorce and continue to carry a shame and guilt over something they can't change. Even if you've experienced divorce, you don't feel like those criteria are met. What I can tell you is the feelings of shame and guilt are not of God. That is not what he wants you to carry. There may be a forgiveness process of yourself. Maybe you need to go through a 70 times 7 forgiveness of yourself in order to come through that. But God does not want you to walk around heavy with guilt and shame and whatever that looks like.
For sure. The topic of like when do you stop trying again and all this stuff. If you in the conversation of separation, the assumption is the person who is doing harm has already stopped trying again, right? Obviously, by their actions, shows that they're not trying at all. one way or another. And usually then you're on the other side trying. And so then it's, when do you stop trying? And what the Bible gives clearance for, it says, yes, don't be abused, don't all that type of stuff. Essentially, when confronted with the problem that the person is unrepentant, the Bible says, then you can leave them to the life that they've chosen. They have now separated from the covenant, because fundamentally the way that this has been structured is not good, and it's not healthy. And so there's a lot of work to be done there. Don't take that lightly at all. Please don't take that lightly. Often divorce is just a really easy way to, like, it's like a get out of jail free card. It's a, I don't want to deal with these problems. I don't want to do the work that it takes to solve these problems. Um, I please hear the grace in this, as much as you can from me, and I apologize ahead of time if this is hurtful to anybody. Uh, Divorce is not an escape solution. Um, and so even if it's, I've been hurt and abused, you are not escaping from that. You are running towards freedom. We're not running from something, we're running to. You hear what I'm saying there? There's something really key in the healing journey of running to, not running from. So I'll leave it there for that. Here's another deep one. I'm going to skip down a few. How do you initiate intimacy after a break in trust? So we've had this. We're going to keep using me as the example. Even I'm okay. Uh, uh, and to clarify for those who weren't there this last week, I had about a year and a half ago a pretty major mental health breakdown, where what I learned is I was diagnosed with bipolar depression, and so there was a lot of delusions of ending my life, and so what that how that came across, there was no, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to just defend myself. There was no physical abuse, but the emotional and verbal abuse was me telling my wife that I want to end my life. And she can't do anything about it. And so when we talk about, I was the one causing hurt. That's what we mean. And we could blame my diagnosis as much as possible. But there was a long period of time where she was begging me to get help, and I wouldn't do it. And so that the unrepentant. So when I say intimacy, I don't just mean sex. I mean close connection. That you would open yourself to them again after feeling like they've not used that correctly. So that could be daughter, son, mom, dad, but especially spouse. I think where that's an everyday connection.
Yeah. I think there's something really important. It actually lands in the same love yourself message. In a season like this, it is really important to take care of yourself. It's really, really important. I remember being so frustrated because my mom was kind of the only person I was really talking to in this time, and then a coworker who also has a spouse that is bipolar, were the only two people I was really pretty open with about what was going on or the depth of what was going on. And I remember both of them asking me repeatedly, "How are you taking care of yourself? How are you taking care of yourself?" And I had created, we were also in this season in some financial struggle. And I literally had a list of who gets therapy first in our house. And it was Eric, and then Balin had a need for some support, and then me. That's not taking care of yourself. Just for clarity, I did not do this part well. I did not love myself well through that season. And so, but now, as Eric has reached a point of health and more stability through the process of diagnosis, medication, therapy, we did experience a pendulum swing where then I broke down, and I remember, yelling at him, like, it's my turn. it's my turn to be broken for a while and like get put back together and get and it was, which is not a healthy response. So now living, something I'm doing now, because I didn't do it well then. Something I'm doing now is ensuring that there is a basis in my life of support. So I have medication for things to help me level because I can't handle everything all the time. I did restart some of that medication during this time. I am seeing a therapist and I am talking through something we hit often is he's not the best person for me to talk about the experience I had during that time, because I don't need to. He already is working through shame and guilt of that time on his own. I don't need to add, my experience doesn't need to add to that. But my experience was very real and has to go somewhere. So I have a therapist that I discuss, and I personally found a therapist that specializes in bipolar as well for me so that she could help explain to me the things that he's unable to. And also ADHD because I'm raising one that actually is ADHD and likely three boys that have ADHD, and so how I'm seeking the resources to help me understand his reality or their reality. I'm taking care of myself, and then I do have boundaries. I need to walk away from this conversation. Yeah.
To the kind somewhat off of that, but somewhat connected to that, to back to a little bit of the question of initiating intimacy, in the context of like a spousal relationship. Um, uh, uh, just for clarification, the our Dwell's stance on sex is it's supposed to be done in the confines of marriage. Is it done that way? Often not. And so, well, the reason for that is there's very strong connections, both emotionally, physically, and spiritually, that happen during that, whether it's a one night stand or it's to a long term committed partner. So, who you're giving that connection to, it's not that you're giving it away and never can get it back and all this other, like, I don't know what, school program that they came up and like, I don't know. Have you ever seen that one where they made someone chew gum and then give it to somebody else? Be like, this is what it's like to have. And it's like, oh,
Gross.
really?
Not seen that analogy. Listen, in a post-COVID world, that can't be an illustration, so we don't have to worry
Not
about
at
that
all.
anymore.
But but that if that's our understanding of what it's like for premarital intimacy, and excuse me to our parents in the room, I'm gonna talk a little bit about sex if that's or
We'll
parents
help
with
with
kids.
conversations with your kids
Yeah.
later if you need.
Um, um, so we all just have a lot of unhealthy understandings of sex and in general, and we just have very poor education, and that's not anybody's fault in the sense that we've just never prioritized it the right way. And so even the people that should have been responsible for it have known that it's wrong but don't have the tools to know how to communicate it right. And so I'm not excusing the fact that we weren't educated right. I'm just saying, try to give some grace to a system that is absolutely broken and has progressively tried to get better. Our goal is to not go backwards. And so if there's not an institution that's going to help with that, it's your job as a parent to do that. So open conversations with those things is what's key. Initiating intimacy, it is going to be awkward. You're not going to want to do it. If you've had a prolonged period where sex has not been a part of your marriage, and you're looking to bring it back, maybe it's after a pregnancy or again after an infidelity, and you've chosen they were repentant and you're trying to get back to that. It is a hard process. For Natalie and I, it was put it on the calendar. And whether we were into it or not, it was gonna get done. Um, I, I, I don't have an easier answer than that. And then eventually the feelings come back, the desire comes back. It's not fake it till you make it. No one's asking you to, and please don't do this. Don't fake a response. If there's a feeling of grief that comes with that, feel that grief. Partners in the room, don't abandon them in that grief. That's what you did last time. So meet them there this time in this.
Yeah, and I'd cap this with a thought of that the intimacy relationship within a marriage is the same as an emotional relationship. You have to take the time to mature it and grow it. Are you always emotionally happy with your partner? No. So if you don't go through periods of this is kind of awkward or this is uncomfortable or maybe this is hurtful, but I know we need to develop and grow through it, likely that relationship has not matured yet. If it is only centered on pleasure, if it is only centered on making one or both happy, that is where it's supposed to live. That's the healthy version of it, but there's a process to get to healthy.
When do you know that a dating relationship has hit its end? That there's not a they're not going to change, and they're not looking like they're going to be the person that's going to be the long-term commitment. That point. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean, like, when you start to feel that, um, uh, bring that to them. Hey, this is what I'm feeling. I have an intention of any relationship that I'm in right now has a long-term journey. I'm not feeling like you're on board for that long-term journey. I would like you to be that person, but I don't know if I'm feeling that from you. What do you feel? Allow them to respond. The response may be hurtful, but it will be less hurtful than 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And it'll be less hurtful when there's a piece of paper and a ring you got to put down. So have those. This is where confrontation, we've raised an entire generation that is completely conflict adverse, is really, really key. And so building up the skills for confrontation is what good friendship looks like. And so being able to look at somebody who is going to have one of the strongest investments in who you are, and making sure that that's the right person, the moment, not a couple weeks after the moment you feel, I don't know if they're going to put the same energy in that I'm needing, what my expectations of a relationship's going to be, right there. And then clarify it as quick as possible, especially if you have other relationships like kids that are attached to that. You do not need to bring anyone else in that journey, because you as an adult might be able to trigger that stuff off and be able to process that well. Your children may not be able to, because they will create emotional attachments to friends. They will see another adult as a friend and won't know how to process that friend gave me something, especially if it's a father figure, that I can't have anymore. So treat all of that with a lot of sensitivity. I know that makes it really hard, especially as a single parent, to learn how to manage that. It's easier when they're not your source of not feeling alone. So if you have a community that doesn't make you feel alone, and then now you've introduced a new person in your life that just adds to that, then the fear of losing that becomes lightened.
Yeah. And real quick, I think it's important how you enter into those dating relationships as well. I can do this really quickly, but if you have not taken the time to write out what you are looking for, what is non-negotiable, then you're not entering them the best way you can, because you can weed out someone very quickly if they have those non-negotiables on there. Like
Non-negotiable is not tall, dark, and handsome.
yeah, yes, yeah, no, but non-negotiable. And
on.
here's the thing: it's
I'm
not.
none of those things. Okay, so I need a chance here, people. Like,
It's not necessarily they've never been to church in their life and that needs to be a non-negotiable. Are they open and willing to go to church and create a God-centered relationship? Don't need someone who's way ahead of you. You're going to feel behind then. But you need to find someone who's open and willing. And then what are the other things? Well, you have kids. They have to like kids.
if you don't like confrontation, how do you build up that stamina? And then, yes, that one of the key things is being able, hopefully being with a person who wants to go on that journey, including the joys and conflicts. So if you could look at conflict of not just trying to express your problems, but trying to find solutions, it becomes less about pointing out what someone's doing wrong and more about how you can find something together. Come on, I need some of us to hear this, is that at the point in which you are trying to attack, this is not conflict anymore. This is resentment. This is vengeance. This is justice. That's not conflict. That's anger. So whenever we say we're conflict adverse, it usually means you're just anger adverse, which is good. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to feel bad. But if you can turn conflict into this isn't meant to make me feel bad, it's actually meant to bring me joy. I'm trying to find solutions to problems in this world. And so building up some stamina to that, first and foremost, you'll hear from Natalie and I over and over again. Some people don't like this. That's fine. It just means you're going to have to do research outside of this. But finding a counselor or a therapist that you can open that up and then ask them, how can you give me some tools? You can practice conflict with them. You can't afford that. There are so many books and podcasts now and all this stuff. I'm not a reader. Become a reader. I'm sorry.
Pick a book and agree to
Yeah,
follow the rules together.
if you have a problem and you can't afford someone to solve that problem for you, you can't afford a $5 book. And yeah, you could afford a library card that's free. And so those are stamina builders. Start small with, hey, don't leave your socks on the floor. And why is because it creates more work for me.
I think the challenging thing is Eric mentioned earlier, I was begging him to get help for a long time. Sometimes you need more voices in the conversation as well. You have to be really careful about who's in that conversation, though. So Eric has a best friend, and we have argued in front of him multiple times. But also that is who I reached out to on the very worst days. And I said, hey, Jordan, I need you to go talk to him because mine is not working. So I think there are safe people to pull into conversations when you need to. I'll reiterate, we are huge proponents of professional counseling. We are not therapists. You are not supposed to be your spouse's therapist. You're not supposed to be your child's therapist. You're not supposed to be your own therapist. I love this like leading businesswoman in the community. I watched her do a talk and she said, we all should have our primary care physician and then our mental health physician. And it should be a regularity. And I believe pretty firmly in that it's really important relationships to establish. They can give you tools for that. But I think there's appropriate times. The person you bring into the conversation has to be a person that your partner trusts also. That is like the really important key of it, or has given permission to speak into their life. So my best friend can't tell Eric, hey, get your stuff together, because they're on my side. They're on our side. If they're my best friend, they better be on our side, not just on my side. But how do you get it together? Well, his best friend, he has no question that his best friend is already on his side. And that friend has set a precedent to tell him how it is and what needs to be done as well. So,
Hey, I'm going to wrap up. Again, just mainly for our kids ministry. I'm open to sitting here for whoever wants to keep asking questions, just because I love this type of dialogue. If you want, show up on Fridays, and we'll do this all the time.
Yeah.
Not even shameless, just
lack of shame plug.
let me pray with this last thing. This was a question that Natalie and I really wanted to make sure was in here. Is what do I do when when I can't feel God. And so very similar to a lot of things that we just talked about today is you have to do the work. It's not that God's not working, it's that you're not working. And I know that's going to be really hard because it feels like blaming the victim. You are not a victim for not hearing the voice of God in your life. He's not withholding. There's just so much noise that it's hard to tune that out and tune him in, okay? He is always speaking. The Holy Spirit is our advocate. And so if I can encourage you, if you don't feel like you can hear God, maybe take some time away from social media, cut off some of the entertainment sources that you're doing. Try a month of nothing but reading. So read his word, read entertainment books, like I don't know, like whatever, like, but just
you want to say
literally anything. I don't read Jurassic Park, read Fourth Wing, we read Harry Potter, but let your mind create things, and then suddenly you'll be able to tune in to what you couldn't hear before, because you're actually tuned into yourself, and then you're tuned into him. He's living in you. He is with you. He has not forsaken you. He has not forgotten you. We got to pray. I know you're brilliant. I really want to hear what you're about
something brilliant, and I was going to compliment you.
I have that a few times.
It's half a sentence. Let me just say it real quick. I don't know if we've ever landed on this before, but when you're reading, especially fiction, you are training your head to recognize someone else's voice in your head. And that when we can't feel God, it's often that we feel like we can't hear him. You have to know the difference between his voice and your voice. So fiction can be a great, nonfiction can as well. For me, that doesn't translate to someone else's voice as much, but a storyteller telling a story, especially, this might be why I'm obsessed with fantasy, is I know instantly it's not, there's a dragon. I don't walk down the street and there's dragons. Okay. So it's definitely someone else's voice in there. And it has it is a great tool to tune into someone else. You're brilliant, babe. Good job.
Thanks, bud.
Didn't think it'd be appropriate if I just start making out with you right here. Okay.
Let's pray. God, we thank you for your word. We thank you that it cuts like a double-edged sword. God, that it cuts out the things that are not good in our lives. And then second, God, that it cuts into the parts that we've coated over with hurts and pains and guilts. So God, I pray, as this has been a releasing series where we've exposed things that needed to be cut out of our lives, God, I pray that then you open up the areas that you wanted to be a part of this entire time. God, especially our hearts, that God, where your word says this is where our sense of self, who we are, lives. And your word says that you stand at the door and knock on our hearts, and will you let him in? So God, today we leave this room to go watch some team win, and to eat some food, and to have some fun, and be with friends and family. God, let us be reminded that you are in every little detail, and that you are with us, and that even in the darkest times and the happiest of times, you are celebrating and mourning with us and partnering with us, giving us the courage to confront, giving us the courage to start over and try again. God, giving us the courage to forgive, even when forgiveness doesn't seem like an option. God, we give this to you. We love you. And in Jesus' name, everyone say amen.
Amen.
Hey, we love you guys. Thank you for going along with us a little bit today. I hope this was fruitful. Next week, we're going to start a series on the values of Dwell Church. What does it mean to be a part of a community called Dwell?
Take this card
We're
with
really
you.
excited.